She thought no one saw her. But I did. You know what it's like when your gut screams at you that something's wrong? When every fiber of your being tells you to run, to look away, to pretend you didn't see what you just saw. That's where I was standing that night, barefoot in the wet grass, watching my daughter-in-law drag something heavy through the darkness behind our old barn. Something wrapped in blankets. Something that made my blood run cold. Before I tell you what I found buried that night, please like this video, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from, because what I uncovered destroyed everything I thought I knew about family. Everything I thought I knew about the woman who married my son. Everything I thought I knew about my own husband. May God rest his lying soul. You have to understand, I'm 63 years old. I've buried my parents. I buried my husband just last year, and my son works overseas in some godforsaken oil field sending money home, but never himself. Never himself. So when Clara, that's my daughter-in-law, when Clara became the only family I had left in this empty house, I clung to her like a drowning woman clings to driftwood. I needed her. I trusted her. I loved her like the daughter I never had. What a fool I was. What a blind, desperate fool. That afternoon, I was doing what I always do when the loneliness gets too heavy. I was baking apple pies for the church charity. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and home, like everything was still normal, still safe. My hands were covered in flour, and I was humming one of those old hymns my mother used to sing. Amazing Grace, I think. How fitting. How perfectly, bitterly fitting. The house was so quiet you could hear the clock ticking in the hallway, the one my husband wound every Sunday for 42 years until his heart gave out. Or until someone made it give out. Because now I wonder about everything. Every meal she cooked for him those last months. Every pill she handed him with that sweet, concerned smile. Every time she insisted I go to bed early while she took care of him. Clara had been different lately. You know how you can sense when someone's hiding something? When their laugh sounds forced and their eyes won't meet yours. She'd been jumpy, nervous, always checking her phone, always making excuses to leave early. Oh, I have errands to run, she'd say. I have appointments. But what kind of appointments keep you out until midnight? What kind of errands require you to wash your clothes at 2 in the morning? I should have asked. God help me, I should have demanded answers. But I was lonely, and she was all I had, and I was so afraid of driving her away with my questions. So I kept my mouth shut and pretended not to notice when she'd come back with dirt under her fingernails, or when I'd hear her crying in the bathroom at night. Then I heard the truck. That rumbling diesel engine cutting through the peaceful afternoon like a knife through silk. I looked out the kitchen window, flour still on my hands, and there she was. Clara, stepping out of that beat-up Ford with something in her arms. Something heavy. Something wrapped in one of my good blankets, the blue one with the roses that I'd used to swaddle my son when he was born. The sight of that blanket in her arms made something inside me go cold. Made something inside me remember. She moved fast, looking around like a thief, like someone with secrets. She headed straight for the old barn, the one that's been falling apart since my husband stopped caring about this place. Stopped caring about anything except whatever poison was eating him alive those last few months. My instincts screamed at me. The same instincts I'd ignored when my husband started acting strange. The same instincts I'd silenced when he began losing weight and forgetting things and looking at me like I was a stranger in his own house. The same instincts that had whispered, late at night, that maybe his heart attack wasn't so natural after all. This time I listened. I slipped off my shoes and followed her, my bare feet silent on the wet grass. Each step felt like walking toward my own grave. Each breath tasted like fear and rage and something else, something that felt like the last shreds of my faith dying in my chest. I crouched behind the old oak tree, the one where my son used to build tree forts, and I watched. I watched Clara set down whatever she was carrying and look around again, making sure she was alone. Making sure I wasn't watching. But I was. God help me, I was. She had a shovel. Where did she get a shovel? When did she plan this? How long has she been coming out here, digging in the dark, burying her secrets in my soil. The sound of that shovel cutting through the earth was like fingernails on a chalkboard. Like bones breaking. Like everything pure and good in this world being torn apart and buried alive. After she finished, after she packed the dirt down and scattered leaves over the disturbed ground, she stood there for a long moment. Just stood there, breathing hard, her hands shaking. And for just a second, just one terrible second, I saw something in her face that made my blood freeze. Satisfaction. Relief. Like she'd just solved a problem that had been keeping her awake at night. Then she gathered up the shovel and walked back to her truck, and I knew. I knew with every cell in my body that whatever she'd just buried was going to change everything. Was going to destroy whatever was left of my world. She drove away, and I waited. Waited until the sound of her engine faded into nothing. Waited until the only sounds left were the crickets and the wind through the corn and my own heart hammering against my ribs like it was trying to escape. Then I ran to that freshly turned earth, and I started digging with my bare hands. The dirt was still warm. Still soft. Flies were already gathering, drawn by something that made my stomach turn. Something that smelled like death and secrets and lies that had been rotting underground for God knows how long. My fingernails broke. My hands bled. But I kept digging, clawing at the earth like a mad woman, like someone possessed. Because I had to know. After watching my husband waste away, after losing him to something I couldn't name or fight or understand, I had to know what fresh hell was growing in my own backyard. The crate was small but heavy. Heavier than it should have been. Heavier than anything that small had a right to be. When I pulled it up, the old rope snapped, and something inside shifted with a sound that made my soul curl up and die. Please, I prayed. Please, God, don't let it be what I think it is. Don't let it be another body. Don't let me find out that the woman I loved like a daughter has been using my land as her personal cemetery. I pried the lid open with a gardening spade, my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold it steady. And inside was a baby monitor and a wrapped infant bottle, sitting next to a photograph. A photograph of my son and Clara from their wedding day, both of them smiling like they had the whole world ahead of them. Like they were going to be happy forever. But the monitor light was blinking. Blinking red like a heartbeat. Like a warning. I ran back to the house, my feet cut and bleeding, my nightgown torn and covered in dirt. I found the receiver in the kitchen junk drawer, the one we'd used years ago when my son was little and afraid of the dark. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely turn it on. Static. Crackling. Then, a baby crying. Somewhere in the distance, through the electronic snow, a baby was crying. Weak and desperate and alone. So alone. My heart stopped. Just stopped beating for a moment while my brain tried to process what I was hearing. Where was this baby? Whose baby was it? Why had Clara buried evidence of its existence in my backyard like it was something shameful, something that needed to stay hidden? And why did looking at that photograph make my chest tight with a fear I couldn't name? I called Sheriff Morrison. We'd known each other since high school, back when he was Jimmy Morrison, and I was still stupid enough to believe that good people got good lives and bad people got what they deserved. He listened to my story with the patience of a man who'd heard too many desperate tales from lonely old women. Now, Ruth, he said in that patronizing tone that made me want to scream. You've been under a lot of stress since Harold passed. Maybe you're seeing things that aren't there. Maybe Clara was just. I know what I saw. I screamed into the phone. I know what I heard. There's a baby out there somewhere, and Clara buried evidence of it like she was trying to make it disappear. But he didn't believe me. Nobody believed me. They all thought I was just a grief-stricken old woman losing her mind in an empty house. They thought the loneliness had finally driven me over the edge. So I did what I should have done months ago. I started investigating myself. Clara's bedroom had always been off limits. Privacy, she'd said. Everyone needs their own space. But privacy, I was learning, was just another word for secrets. And I was done respecting secrets. Hidden in her closet, Behind boxes of shoes she never wore, I found medical supplies. For bags, syringes, bottles of medication with labels that had been torn off, blood-stained sheets that she'd tried to wash but couldn't quite get clean, and hospital discharge papers. Papers with forged signatures, papers that talked about a birth that never happened according to the official records. Papers that mentioned complications, emergency procedures, a baby that was supposed to have died. Supposed to have died. That night, I followed her again. Followed her down roads I'd never been on, to places I'd never seen. She drove for an hour into the next county, to a rundown farmhouse that looked like it had been abandoned for years. But there were lights on inside. And when she opened the door, I heard it again. That crying. That desperate, heartbroken crying of a baby who'd been left alone too long. She was inside for maybe 20 minutes. When she came out, she was carrying something. A diaper bag. Formula. And her face was streaked with tears, but not the kind of tears you cry when you're sad. The kind you cry when you hate yourself for what you're doing, but can't stop doing it anyway. The truth came to me in pieces, like a puzzle made of broken glass. Each piece cut deeper than the last. DNA results, when I finally found a way to get them done, confirmed what my heart already knew. The baby was my biological grandson. My blood. My son's child. But not Clara's. Not Clara's. My husband, my Harold, who I'd loved and trusted and mourned, had been having an affair. Had been living a double life for God knows how long. Had fathered a child with another woman just months before his death. And Clara knew. Clara had known all along. The birth mother, I never learned her name. Never wanted to, had died in childbirth. Complications, the forged papers said. No family, no one to claim the baby except the father. Except Harold, who was already dead by then. Except Clara, who saw the baby not as an innocent life, but as a threat to everything she'd worked for. As proof of betrayal. As competition for an inheritance she thought was rightfully hers. So she took him. Took this helpless infant and hid him away like a dirty secret. Fed him just enough to keep him alive, but not enough to let him thrive. Kept him isolated and alone while she figured out what to do with him long term. The baby monitor, the buried evidence, it was her insurance policy. If anyone ever questioned what happened to Harold's illegitimate child, she could claim he'd died. She had the forged death certificate to prove it. She could bury the truth so deep that no one would ever find it. But I found it. God help me, I found it. The social workers didn't believe me at first. They looked at me, a grief-stricken 63-year-old woman with dirt under her fingernails and desperation in her eyes, and they saw instability. They saw someone who might be dangerous to herself and others. Mrs. Patterson, the caseworker said in that calm, professional voice that made me want to throw something. We understand you've been through a difficult time. Losing your husband, dealing with family stress, these things can make us see patterns that aren't really there. Patterns that aren't really there. As if a starving baby hidden in an abandoned farmhouse was just a figment of my imagination. As if my daughter-in-law's lies and deception were just grief-induced hallucinations. They questioned my sanity. They questioned my fitness to care for a child at my age. They suggested therapy, medication, support groups for widows experiencing adjustment disorders. Adjustment disorders. Like discovering that your husband had been cheating and your daughter-in-law had been slowly murdering an innocent baby was just something I needed to adjust to. You're too old, they said. Too emotionally unstable. This child needs a stable environment with younger parents who can provide proper care. As if stability meant anything when that baby had been living in hell for months. As if age meant anything when I was the only person in the world who gave a damn whether he lived or died. I spent 3 weeks crying myself to sleep, clutching that wedding photograph, wondering if I was really losing my mind. Wondering if the loneliness had finally broken something inside me that couldn't be fixed. But then Sheriff Morrison came to see me with news that changed everything. Ruth, he said, settling his bulk into Harold's old recliner. I owe you an apology. We've been investigating Clara's finances and, well, you were right to be suspicious. $250,000. That's how much she'd stolen from the family trust using forged signatures. Harold's signatures, perfectly copied from documents she'd watched him sign 100 times. The affair wasn't just about lust or loneliness. It was about inheritance. About bloodlines. About a second heir that could claim half of everything Harold had worked for his entire life. If the baby had lived, if he'd been acknowledged as Harold's legitimate son, Clara would have lost everything. The house, the land, the trust fund that was supposed to support her for the rest of her life. She would have been reduced to a widow with no claim on her dead husband's fortune. So she made the baby disappear. Faked a miscarriage to explain the pregnancy she couldn't hide. Created false documents to support her story. And when the real birth mother died, she saw her opportunity to bury the truth so deep that it would never surface. She's been paying rent on that farmhouse for 8 months, Morrison told me. Cash payments, no lease, no paper trail. The owner thought she was using it for storage. Storage. Like that innocent baby was just another piece of unwanted furniture. We're going to get her, Ruth. But we need your help. My help. After weeks of being dismissed as a crazy old woman, they suddenly needed my help. I agreed to wear a wire. Agreed to meet Clara and pretend I was willing to keep her secrets in exchange for money. Agreed to put myself in danger because it was the only way to save that baby's life. The meeting was set for the old apple orchard, the same place where Harold had proposed to me 43 years ago. Back when I thought love was enough. Back when I thought I knew what kind of man I was marrying. Clara arrived carrying a gun and wearing the face of a stranger. The woman I'd loved like a daughter was gone, replaced by something cold and calculating and completely without conscience. I know you found the monitor, she said without preamble. I know you've been asking questions. Clara, honey, I just want to understand. Don't. Her voice cut through the evening air like a blade. Don't pretend you care about understanding. You want to destroy me just like Harold destroyed me. Harold's dead, Clara. He can't hurt you anymore. She laughed, and the sound was like breaking glass. Harold's not dead, Ruth. Harold lives on in that bastard child, in that constant reminder of how little I meant to him. Do you know what it's like to find out your husband has been screwing some 20-year-old slut while you're home cooking his dinner and washing his clothes? The gun was steady in her hands. Too steady. Like she'd been practicing for this moment. Do you know what it's like to realize that everything you've sacrificed, everything you've given up, means nothing because he decided to stick his dick in fresh meat? Clara, please. I gave him the best years of my life. She screamed, and I could see the madness in her eyes now, bright and terrible and completely beyond reason. I nursed him when he was sick, I supported him when his business was failing, I played the perfect wife for 23 years. And my reward? My reward was finding out about his whore and his bastard and realizing that I was going to lose everything because of his selfishness. The wire was recording everything. Every confession, every admission of guilt, every revelation about what she'd done to that innocent baby. So yes, I buried the evidence. Yes, I faked the documents. Yes, I've been keeping Harold's son locked up like the dirty secret he is. Because that's what he is, Ruth. A dirty secret that should have died with his whore mother. He's just a baby, Clara. He didn't choose any of this. He chose to be born. She raised the gun, and I could see her finger tightening on the trigger. He chose to exist, to threaten everything I worked for. Well, I'm making a different choice. I'm choosing to bury this whole mess so deep that it'll never see daylight again. In the distance, I could hear sirens. The cavalry was coming, but they might be too late. Starting with you, Clara said. The gunshot was louder than thunder. Louder than my own screaming. But somehow, impossibly, I was still alive. Still breathing. Still conscious enough to see Clara being tackled to the ground by 3 deputies while Sheriff Morrison knelt beside me, checking for wounds. She'd missed. In her rage and madness, she'd missed from 6 feet away. But the shock of it all, the betrayal, the terror, the adrenaline crash, was enough to put me in the hospital for a week. Enough to make my heart skip beats and my blood pressure spike and my hands shake so hard I couldn't hold a coffee cup. I didn't care. I would have died right there in that orchard if it meant saving that baby. They brought him to me in the hospital. 3 months old and so thin I could count his ribs through his onesie. His eyes were too big for his face, and when I looked into them, I saw Harold. I saw my son. I saw every generation of Patterson men who'd come before, all compressed into this tiny, fragile life that had somehow survived despite everything. He's safe now, Sheriff Morrison told me as I held him for the first time. Clara's in custody, the assets have been restored, and Social Services has approved your custody application. Safe. After months of being treated like a disposable inconvenience, he was finally safe. Clara was sentenced to 25 years for fraud, child endangerment, and attempted murder. The judge called her crimes unconscionable acts of greed and cruelty that strike at the very heart of family bonds. 25 years. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough for what she'd done to this innocent child, for the months of neglect and isolation and barely adequate care that had stunted his growth and delayed his development. But it was something. It was justice, even if it came too late to undo the damage. The baby, my grandson, my William Harold Patterson, recovered slowly. Physical therapy to help with his delayed motor skills. Speech therapy because he'd never heard enough human voices to learn proper communication. Occupational therapy to teach him how to trust, how to bond, how to believe that the world might contain more love than cruelty. I named him William after Harold's father, the man Harold should have been. The man Harold might have been if he hadn't let his weaknesses destroy everything good in his life. Some nights, when William finally falls asleep in my arms, I think about Harold. I think about the man I married, the man I loved, the man I thought I knew. I think about how his secrets and lies and selfish choices created this cascade of destruction that nearly killed his own son. I don't forgive him. I can't. But I understand him a little better now. I understand how easy it is to make choices that seem harmless in the moment, but create consequences that echo through generations. Harold's affair gave me William. Harold's death freed Clara to reveal her true nature. Harold's deception led to truth in ways he never could have imagined. Maybe that's what people mean when they talk about God working in mysterious ways. Maybe destruction and redemption are just two sides of the same coin, and you can't have one without the other. Dawn comes early in October, streaming through the nursery windows like liquid gold. William is 18 months old now, healthy and strong and stubborn as hell, just like his grandfather, just like his father, just like every Patterson who ever drew breath on this earth. He looks at me with Harold's eyes, but there's something different in them. Something pure. Something untainted by the lies and betrayals that poisoned his grandfather's life. When he smiles, I see the future. I see a boy who will grow up knowing that he is loved, that he is wanted, that he is worth fighting for. I see a man who will make better choices than his grandfather, who will understand that family is about more than blood. It's about loyalty and sacrifice and putting innocent lives before selfish desires. I thought I'd buried the past that night behind the barn. But what I dug up wasn't just evidence of Clara's crimes or proof of Harold's betrayal. What I dug up was my reason to live again. My purpose. My chance to raise a child the right way, to give him the love and stability that Harold's choices nearly stole from him. Clara wanted to bury the truth so deep it would never surface. But truth is like water, it always finds a way up. It always finds the light. And in the end, the light is all that matters. The light is what saves us all. Share this story if you believe truth always finds the light. Share it if you believe that love is stronger than greed, that courage is stronger than fear, that sometimes the most broken people are the ones who fight hardest to protect the innocent. Share it because somewhere out there, another grandmother is watching, another family is hiding secrets, another child is waiting to be saved. And maybe, just maybe, this story will give someone the courage to dig up their own truth before it's too late. Before the innocent pay the price for the guilty's sins. Before love dies in the darkness of buried secrets. William is sleeping now, safe and warm, and completely unaware of how close he came to being lost forever. His breathing is steady, his face peaceful, his tiny fist curled around my finger like he's holding onto life itself. He is holding onto life itself. And I'm holding onto him. That's enough. After everything we've been through, after all the pain and betrayal and loss, it's more than enough. It's everything.